All right. So welcome to the Scholarly Snippets Writing the Article Manuscript. I'm Kelli Hines from Western University of Health Sciences. I'm one of the librarians there. And so today we are talking about the article writing process. So I'm going to talk about basically breaking the article writing process into more manageable steps, including outlining, drafting, editing, soliciting feedback, and revising. This is a very broad overview. So if you want us to go into more detail about different facets of the writing process in future workshop, please give that feedback in the survey. But I do hope that this will be helpful for you. And we're going to go ahead and launch a poll to find out a little bit about who is, what your current role is. So I can just kind of get a sense for what who we've got here. Okay. All right. So it looks like we've got an interesting mix of people. So lots of librarians as expected, higher than usual percentage of students, some faculty. Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. So in theory, the writing process is really straightforward and easy. You just like brainstorm, you have an idea about what you might want to write about, you do a little bit of research, you maybe outline it, do a draft, then you do some editing and revising, get some feedback and send it out. In practice, it can be a little bit messier than that, and you can move between different parts of the process quite a bit. As you draft, you might find out that you need to do more research, and you find more research, and then you need to brainstorm new ideas. Some people edit as they draft, some people do outline, some people don't. So what I just want to say is that everyone's process is going to look a little bit different, and you're probably going to do all or most of these parts of the process, but depending on your particular writing style or your approach or the needs of your life, you might do things in a different order from other people, or, you know, and that's okay. There's no, basically, I'm not a prescriptivist, I'm a descriptivist. There are tons of ways to be a good writer, and any type of writer can produce good work. And there is no one true process that works for everyone. What matters is that whatever process that you have works for you. And if you're working with co-authors, that it is at least somewhat compatible with what they're doing as well, and that it doesn't, you know, just like completely destroy their process. But everyone brings different strengths. Everyone has different approaches. There's no one set order to do these things in. There's no one set approach. So I just encourage you to be flexible, but also to kind of know yourself. And also know that your process might change over time, and it might vary from project to project. So in one project, you might find that even though you don't normally outline, you find yourself doing a project where you really need to wrap your brain around kind of a more complex structure, or it's a lot longer than projects you've done in the past. And so you do need to, even though you didn't before, or you might find that, you know, the research part of the process changes, or that you normally don't edit as you revise, but now you want to. And so if it's okay if it kind of changes over time or varies a little bit. So I would say just be open to trying new things and trying different processes, and don't let somebody talk you out of what works. There are lots of different ways to be a real writer, and, you know, just because you don't write every single day, or if you write in the mornings or write at night, or if your writing process is a little bit more chaotic than other people's, where you need lots and lots and lots of different drafts, that's not bad. Don't let somebody tell you, you know, that it is. It's just your process, and that is okay. As long as it gets you where you need to go, it's good. So the first step is kind of finding a time and a place, because just like with the friend that you run into and you say we should hang out sometime, if you don't actually schedule that sometime, you'll go 3 years and you'll run into that friend again, and you will never have hung out sometime because nobody actually scheduled it. So it might be a sort of flexible scheduling where you move around, but the fact is that if you don't make the time for it, if you're just kind of waiting for when you feel like it or when it's going to be convenient, you might never feel like it. It might never be convenient. So I encourage you, as we are kind of going through this, as I put up some of these questions on the screen, feel free to jot down your answers to these questions, either in like a piece of paper by you, or feel free to drop it in the chat as well. But ask yourself, what specific time can I dedicate to focus on writing related tasks? So this might be a specific day. It might be, what's a time that you can say that is there that you could put in your schedule. Maybe it's a specific day, maybe it's a particular time, maybe you want it every day or not, but what time can you set aside for it? And then where are you going to write? Some people just like you writing in the same place that they do everything else. So you're like, I can write in my office and that's fine, or at my kitchen table. Some people might want to go somewhere else, like I want to go to the library, or I want to go to a cafe, or I want to go to a friend's house, or I want to write outside. But just think of places that you go to write, and also maybe think in the past about like places that have been good places to focus for you, because everyone's a little bit different in terms of what they need. And then ask yourself how you can make your environment conducive to focus and creativity. And again, this is going to vary by person. Some people need kind of ambient background noise. Some people really need like absolute perfect silence. Some people like having things that they can kind of browse, books they can kind of browse near them that helps them kind of feel creative and connected. Some people need just like absolutely positively no distractions, phone in another room, everybody in another room. So ask yourself kind of what tools you need, what you would need to make it conducive to focus and creativity for you. What kind of environment do you work well in? And then I would encourage you to just like go ahead and write that in your calendar. Say, I'm going to write on Saturday at 7 o'clock at the cafe down the street, whatever it is for you. And there are different ways to structure your time. So some people, most people are familiar with is rhythmic, which is where you set aside a specific time every day, usually the same time, and it's very much a routine that you have. For some people, that's not realistic. They just can't get into that kind of rhythm, or their schedule or other demands on their time are such that that it's just not feasible because every day looks a little bit different. And so for them, like a bimodal structure, which is where you don't set aside time every day, but you set aside perhaps specific days or specific weeks or specific months of the year. So you might say, okay, during the summer, that's the time that I dedicate to writing because I'm not teaching or I'm not in school. And that's the time that I'm going to really focus on that. This is very popular in academics, for obvious reasons, because it's kind of structured in that very sort of set way. And then there is monastic, which is where you just eliminate everything that is not the thing that you are doing, and you just eliminate, email. So some people go as far as I don't have an email, or I just don't have any other way that people can get in touch with me. I just eliminated a lot of like really common distractions so that I can focus on this work. This is not super attainable for most people, but you can do sort of smaller versions of this with things like a writing retreat or a writing weekend, where maybe you go to a friend's house or an Airbnb or cheap motel, or maybe an official writing retreat, and you have time set aside. But I would encourage you to do that kind of after you've sort of established more regular writing patterns so that you don't feel as much pressure on yourself to perform at that time, that you kind of know that if you have time set aside, that you can actually focus and use it. And then there is the journalistic style, which is where you can just kind of, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you just decide it's time to write and you just kind of turn your focus on and you just sort of hyper focus on the writing that you're doing at the time. And this isn't something that works for most people's lives or brains, but again, if you can do it, if this is how your brain works, and you can just kind of switch on and off like that, that is fantastic. If that works for you, you rock on. So let's talk about sort of finding a topic. So some ways to kind of brainstorm a topic are to ask yourself some of these following questions. Again, encourage you to jot some of these down. So what topics interest you or engage you emotionally? Because if it's interesting to you, either on an intellectual or emotional level, you're going to be more willing to spend the long, hard hours that it takes to kind of focus on it. What problems or issues are you facing in your job and field? So maybe you're looking at how to engage students in the classroom better, or how to kind of do a lot with not very much classroom time, or perhaps something, a lot of patients are presenting with a particular thing in your clinic. Um, or you're looking at disinformation and how do you deal with that in your particular field. What are some things that you don't understand as well as you'd like, that you're just kind of curious about, that you want to kind of do research and you want to kind of understand more? These could be really interesting things to write about and research, just to kind of use writing as a way to kind of clarify your thoughts on a topic and to kind of wrap your mind around something. And what do you think? What could you think or talk about for hours? What's something that you could do an impromptu TED talk on, and you could talk for 20 minutes or an hour just off the top of your head? So those are really interesting. So these are some ways that you can kind of think of some topics. Obviously, not all of these are necessarily going to be a good fit for like an academic journal article, but you know, with some flexibility, they might be. So you can kind of look at some of these and look at the overlap between what you're interested in and kind of what people want to read about. Next, find your social support. Writing can be very lonely sometimes. Helen Sword talks about writing for, with, and alongside other people. So if you read the acknowledgement section of pretty much any book, you'll see just like a long list of people who supported, who helped. And so find those people. So ask yourself, who supports you? Who's interested in your topic? So these are going to be the potential readers that you are writing for. So it can really help you to kind of clarify who it is that you're writing for, and just kind of like imagining, like a poor librarian struggling with a low budget to create an engaging activity for students. And you're like, hey, I did an activity with a really low budget. And just think of like that librarian who would be like, oh, thank goodness, somebody who understands, here's something that I could do. Who's somebody that you can ask for feedback? So this might be an advisor, it might be a colleague, it might be somebody that, sort of at, somebody that you met at a professional conference, who does work on that particular topic. Can you think of somebody that you would like to co-write with? So this might be, again, an advisor, a colleague, somebody that you met at a conference, reach out and ask and see if they would be interested in writing something, if you have sort of a specific plan. And is there somebody that could just write alongside you? So somebody maybe that could be kind of like an accountability buddy, where you're both working on writing together, but they might be in completely different fields. And no one person is going to be able to support you in every single way. So somebody can give you really good, valuable, critical feedback might not be the person that you go to for a pep talk. But these are all kinds of people who can support you on your writing journey. And then you can kind of make a plan. This is a sample plan from Wendy Laura Belcher's book, Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks. It is a book that's geared more for the social scientists, and it is really more how to revise a pre-existing article for publication in 12 weeks. But you can definitely kind of use this as a way to kind of gauge, here are sort of the parts of the process. Here are different things that I can focus on. And you can kind of tweak this to meet your needs. So you could say, all right, I'm going to spend, these are all the things that I need to do. Here's the time that I'm going to spend on each of these things. And, you know, it might take a little bit longer than 12 weeks. You might spend, you know, a couple of weeks on one or up to a month on another. But, you know, some of them you might spend a little bit less than a week. You might spend just, you know, a few days on like making the plan, for instance. So just kind of depending on what your strengths are. And so if there's kind of one takeaway, one of two takeaways, is that your first draft is going to be rough. It's going to be terrible. This is normal and this is okay. It's not, don't expect it to come out perfectly the first time, because it won't. Even if it's like okay the first time, it's not going to be the best it could be. And that's why you have the feedback. That's why you have the editing. In some ways, writers are, unlike other artists, they are building their own materials. Like painters have paint, and you know, knitters have yarn, but writers have words and ideas. And so you have to kind of make the words and ideas in the first place that you later shape into something good. So the first draft can kind of just be building your materials that you then work with later to actually make your work. So I'm going to kind of give you some tips on how you can structure it and how you can kind of structure a first draft, and some questions that you can ask yourself as you're doing this. So I'm going to start with the assumption that the article that you're writing is an introduction, method, results, and discussion article. And this is kind of a funnel format, or like an hourglass format, where you start in the introduction with the broader area or topic of concern, and you introduce kind of what is unknown or contested. And then the method and results are focused on a very narrow specific question, your specific claim or contribution that you're making, your experiment that you did, your case study that you saw. And then you broaden out again to say what you found enhances the understanding of the broader topic. And so since I know that it can be really easier to start with not a blank page, I've given you some questions that you can ask, and I've also compiled these into a Word document, which I can send as part of the, that will include as the materials when this is posted to the LibGuide. So you don't have to write all of these down, but you can screenshot them if you want, but I'll also compile this as a Word template that you can use. So just as kind of like a rough draft priming the pump, as you're writing your introduction, you can say this topic is a problem, or is important, or is a concern because, and then whatever that is, that'll kind of cue you to write about whatever that is. We already know, and then this is where the literature comes in. So what do you already know? How do you know it? Who's already said this? What we don't yet know, understand, or agree on is whatever. The question we want to answer is, and then whatever your question is. For the method section, you can say, we hypothesize that, and whatever your hypothesis is. To answer the question that you introduced in the introduction, and then you describe what you did. How did you design the study? How did you recruit people? Who did you ask? What experiment did you set up, etc. For the results, you know, we found that, and then just write what you found. What did you find? What were the results of your studies? And then the discussion, our results support, don't support, or partially support our hypothesis because, the implications of our findings are, a possible explanation if there was an unexpected finding, why might this have occurred? What are the limitations of your study? What further research is there? And so I have a Word template. So you kind of have like 2 pages sort of already done, and it's just kind of like your name and these drafts. So obviously you wouldn't leave this in there, but if you're just kind of writing a really rough draft, these prompts can kind of help you get going. Some other common structures that you might see that won't necessarily fall into the IMRD format would be like a case report or a case study, a review article, which will kind of have its own structure, and then trade or practice-based articles, which tend to be shorter and not as research-based. So this might be something like how this new law will affect hiring at your dental practice, or keeping up on new concept in the field. And so those don't tend to be ranked as highly for things like promotion and tenure, but they're, on the flip side, very useful for people who are in practice, and they're very quick, and they do still serve a very valuable purpose. So depending on, again, who you're writing for and who your audience is, that could be another type of article that you might wind up doing. And so the second takeaway that I want you to have is, like, don't try to do everything all at once. Break everything into small assignments. So this concept is from Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, as is the concept of the terrible first draft. And it comes from a story about her brother who was working on a book report about birds and had left it all to the last minute and was completely overwhelmed, surrounded by like all of these different books about all of these different birds, and was just in tears, overwhelmed. And his dad came up and said, "It's okay, buddy, just take it bird by bird." So split things into something that's manageable so that you can make progress on something and you can just kind of move forward on meaningful work. So an example might be, all right, in this half-hour session, I'm just going to find 5 articles that I might review for my literature search that might be relevant. You don't have to read them now necessarily. Your job is just to find them. You might say, all right, I'm going to try and narrow my article topic to an answerable question that I could actually test or that I could actually do something with. I might do a bullet point of the method section, just a super rough draft of the method section that just described what we did, and I'll fix it later, but it's just a rough draft of that. Maybe I'll create a graph describing the results of test 1. So just show what that looks like. Maybe if I have time, I'll write up, kind of what that means. Maybe I'll identify some journals that I could publish in. Maybe I got feedback that my discussion section didn't really explain what the relevance of or importance of my results was. So I'm going to revise that just to kind of make that more clear. So break it down into really small things that you can do in whatever half hour, 2 hours that you have, so that you can actually feel like you're moving forward and you get that satisfaction of completing a goal versus, you sat and stared at a computer for a few hours and you have nothing whatsoever to show for it. And then finally, when you're doing editing and feedback, one of the first things to do is read it out loud. This will catch more typos, more just clunky sentences, things that you thought you explained well and you didn't. If you actually have to hear it out loud, you'll know that you'll be able to hear that it's wrong in a way that your eye might just kind of skim over. You can do a post-draft outline to check the structure, particularly if it's a longer article. You might just make a bullet point list of what you said in each section or in each paragraph, just to kind of be like, okay, does this order actually make sense? Is this clear? Is this the order I want to present this in? When you're asking people for feedback, ask for the feedback that you need at a particular stage. If you're kind of doing a rough draft and you just kind of need encouragement, you just need to know, like, is this an interesting topic? Do I seem to be on the right track with these? Who else would you suggest I read to do this? Is this argument making sense? Or you might say, all right, this is pretty much done. I'm going to be submitting this to journals next, in the next couple of weeks. I just want to make sure that there aren't any egregious typos. Just kind of ask for what kind of feedback you want from people, and that will give you a better chance of getting whatever it is that you need. And then take the time to listen and absorb the feedback from others before you decide whether to take it. As Noel Coward said, I can take any amount of feedback, as long as any amount of criticism, as long as it is all unalloyed praise. But all our feedback is not necessarily going to be positive, but the negative feedback will make it stronger. It gives us another chance to fix something that might be wrong. However, not everyone is right about everything. You might decide to ignore a particular piece of feedback, but to just take the time to really think about it, absorb it, and thank people for their time giving you feedback. And then set it free. Don't agonize forever. Once you've figured out a journal to submit it to, and you've made it about as good as you possibly can in the time that you've allotted yourself, just let it go and send it out and start working on something else, so that because if you agonize forever, it'll never be perfect. You'll just continue agonizing forever and it won't be done, and somebody else might do something similar, and then you can't publish it and your data is old and you're sad. So just set it free, let it go after a particular time. Make it as good as you can, but after a certain point, just stop agonizing, because also the reviewers will have feedback, so it's not going to be perfect regardless. 99.99999% of the time, you're going to have to make changes anyway, and you're going to have to make feedback, so it's still not going to be perfect. So after a certain point, just let it go and send it out, get the feedback, get published, or send it on to somebody else who's a better fit. All right, and that's it from me. Now I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Let me just check the chat. Okay, so I have a question from Dion. It's about what's the best way to start a manuscript for a literature review with a group of individuals after completing a literature matrix. Okay, so this is going to kind of depend on what you want. I didn't really go super into details about kind of working with people, but communication is going to be very important. So one thing that you're going to probably want to narrow your topic and kind of your method. So you said you did a matrix, so you might just start with the matrix, kind of start with sort of, I guess that's sort of your method section, where you've done the research and you've kind of ranked the articles in terms of their relevance to their question, I assume, and the kind of the efficacy and so on. So you've ranked them already kind of based on the criteria. So I would say start kind of with those. I would probably start with the method section, and then maybe go into the introduction, talking about kind of the scope of the problem, and kind of talking about why, make sure that you are kind of answering why the review is important, why it's helpful, what questions it's going to answer, because I think that's one of the biggest places where people can sometimes go wrong, is they write something but they don't really explain clearly why it's important or how it connects to what it is that people already know, or they don't explain kind of what's new about what they're doing, or why anyone should care. So it can help to kind of think of your audience in those terms. Who needs this information? So it sounds like people, you said it was a drug review. yeah, the effects of a drug on different human body systems. So think of kind of who is your audience for that? Is it like other students? Is it practitioners? Is it, you know, so I might also look at kind of narrowing down your focus too. Does that answer your question? Does that help too? And I might also look for, you know, somebody to give you sort of that specific feedback too. All right, excellent. Are there any additional questions? Feel free to either unmute or drop those into the chat. And so these were my sources. They are all great. I recommend them, yes. And so we have the survey link. So our next survey, so if you wanted more information about how to choose a research topic, we've got you covered. That's going to be on August 17th. So there's the link to register for that. Please let us know how we did, if this was helpful, what things we could do to make it more helpful, what additional talks we should have about this. And then these are our slides, and all of our videos, all of our presentations are Creative Commons licensed for non-commercial use. So if you feel free to share these with whoever, if you want to reuse them in courses, LibGuides, what have you, feel free to link. But all right, I hope that was helpful. And if there are no other questions, then I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks so much.